I'm Norman Guadagno, CMO at Acoustic, and welcome to The Reset, a series of conversations with marketers and other experts on how they're driving their business forward following the pandemic year and all the changes that marketers and others have had to endure in business. And I'm excited to be joined today by Kelly Krumreich, who is VP of GTM Enablement at Allocadia. Welcome, Kelly.
Hey, Norman, how are you?
I am terrific, and thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
I think we have a lot to cover, and I'm going to sort of start out by admitting right away that I am a part of the Allocadia fan club. I am a two-time customer now, and want to make sure that we're going to talk about all sorts of stuff, but get that out of the way that we are happy users, and we may be able to talk a little bit more about that later on, and a big fan of what you've been doing. But a lot of people may not be familiar with Allocadia.
No, that's
so
true.
Maybe you could just spend a minute talking about what Allocadia is. And also, I'd love to just understand how you ended up there and what exactly you do in GTM enablement, because that's
another title.
So let's get a handle around it.
Well, thank you so much. I'm just so thrilled to be here and to be able to talk with you as somebody who's experienced the value of Allocadia directly in numerous settings. I think it's a real treat, to say the least. I don't always get to talk to our customers directly, so because they keep me in the back office, but this is a lot of fun. So thank you for having me. The way I look at Allocadia, first of all, it's software as a service, it's enterprise grade software. Let's make that clear. But really what its value is really enabling marketers to create a level of trust within their own organizations around investment and performance. And so when you think about the challenges that most marketers would have managing those dollars and making sure that they're performing to the outcomes that everyone's expecting of them, most organizations struggle on a daily basis with that. And so that's what we help to do. It's not the sexiest topic on the planet, but
it's way up. Very high on my sexy topics list.
Right. And I think that when you do understand that and you're talking to the right people like yourselves and organizations, we add a tremendous amount of value. And it really is a journey. There's a fair amount of change management associated to that. But what we see with customers like yourselves is that the benefit is enormous. And really, when we think about the philosophy of our founders, it really was about building confidence in marketers. Marketers don't always have that seat at the table. It can be fairly intimidating going and sitting down with a leader in finance for your first time and having a conversation about how your budget is and how well you're performing to the objective. So that's really our goal, is to enable marketers to have very reliable, trustworthy, clear conversations with their finance partners, as well as their other internal stakeholders that need their performance.
Great. Well explained. So how did you end up there? How long have you been there? And what exactly do you do again?
I've been in the SaaS software space for about 20 years now, so I am a bit of an old broad compared to the typical demographic that I work with these days. But basically, my journey here, I've always been attracted to sort of the scale-up phase of software companies. So I've had the pleasure of doing that a couple of times now. I was in the human capital management space with Taleo for 10 years, exited to Oracle with them, did a gig with a very small
company. Another great company.
I think you know a couple people from there as well, like Dave Michaud and Heidi Malin.
Dave, get a shout out here to Dave Michaud. He was my first boss at Oracle. And just one of the nicest, smartest, most genuine people I've ever worked with.
Yep, and a very talented photographer as well. Yeah, no, we've stayed in touch, and that actually got me to Allocadia as well. As we all sort of float around on the same little cloud, believe it or not, after 20 years, and we have those pathways. But I had an opportunity as well to work with a machine learning AI-based search provider, Coveo. I've always worked for Canadian-based companies. Surprise, surprise. They don't stay Canadian, unfortunately. That's a whole other conversation.
Another whole thing. Yes, I've seen that.
Yeah, and so we got to that 100 million mark, and I decided to take a step back. I had some family care issues with my father having had a stroke back in summer of 2019, so I took a step back, and then COVID hit, and so I was using a lot of my time to volunteer, help small businesses with their technology strategies as they're trying to shift. But then I was introduced to Jocelyn Brown through our network, and she introduced me to Allocadia, who is at that point in growth that I always find so fun. That sort of that race to $100 million on the ARR side, and they had an opening to come in to do RevOps, and so that's what I did. I came over last summer. The role has sort of shifted more towards this concept of go-to-market enablement. Whereas we have the finance side of revenue operations, my focus and my team is really field facing to ensure that we have the right process, data, systems, strategy to support the go-to-market from soup to nuts. And so that's where I'm at right now. And I just adore the team. I know you've had lots of interactions with our field organization.
Yep.
And the one thing that's kept me really engaged is the people. Coming in through COVID, getting hired through COVID, that's been an interesting journey, not getting to meet anybody face to face. But I think that our culture is one that's extremely authentic, very personable and personal, and extremely collaborative. So I haven't always had that in all my gigs. So that's really what drew me here, and I'm excited to move forward and see what's next.
So as somebody who joined during the pandemic, there's a lot of those folks out there now because it was a year of companies hiring and a lot of companies scaling up during that time.
Yeah.
And what we've tried to focus on in these set of discussions has been this notion of lots of things were reset and businesses had to rethink how they operated. Marketers had to think how they go to market. There's just a lot that's changed. And, maybe you could just share briefly the sort of experience of coming into a company during COVID and lockdown, and then sort of segue perhaps into, as we're now in the end of the first quarter of 21, what you see as some of the changes that are taking place.
Yeah, on paper, my life really hasn't changed that much because I've always worked virtually, like hybrid, where you're working from home, but then you're going into a head office every once in a while for meetings. So my kids are in their early teens. I didn't have that burden of having to have small kids at home. So on paper, it wasn't that hard of an adjustment. And even coming into an organization like Allocadia. But when I think about the authenticity required now in all of our relationships, you just can't get away with the bullshit anymore, which in my mind is extremely refreshing. To me, that's the silver lining of all of this, as long as we keep it that way. We'll
true.
see.
It is very true.
But that was the big thing this time around. That's what felt different, was my craving for truly authentic engagement with my colleagues, with my partners. I speak and manage a lot of software vendors myself because I'm responsible for purchasing and maintaining our own tool set. So I really demand that authenticity now. And it just happened for me through COVID. I think that has a lot to do with my getting involved in my community. I never really had time or space to volunteer and give back as much as I wanted to. But that is such a core fundamental part of my life now. And I needed Allocadia to understand that and support it. And they've been wonderful through that as well, And I know that you guys are doing that work as well with your CMO huddle. right? This need to really connect now and maintain those connections and be very purposeful about those connections. That's something that I've been very mindful of. Versus before, it was just go, 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 go. The calendar was always jammed. You didn't really take a ton of time to get to know people, or you relied on those face-to-face meetings when you went into the office to have those connection points. And don't get me wrong, I miss whiteboards. I really miss whiteboards.
I have a little teeny one that I purchased for my home here, so I can.
You know, when you'd all get in a room and you'd be drawing all day. I miss those days. I miss the dinners out. But I feel like we've shifted to have way more meaningful one-on-one connections. So I'll make a point of reaching out to colleagues and saying, hey, let's grab a virtual coffee. We've got sort of a Slack matchup that if you don't know somebody, every 6 weeks, they're going to throw you in a meeting where you're actually going to spend time. Yep. So I think that's been the biggest change for me is connecting locally at the community level, but then recognizing that I need to be proactive in those connections with my colleagues virtually.
And a couple of things you said there really resonate, and I've heard from others, which is this notion of authenticity.
Yeah.
That when every connection, for better or worse, is like this, you really, in my mind, it's almost become binary. You can just be authentic,
yep.
or you can be nothing more than somebody playing a character on a very small TV show that you're engaged with here. And I think that move towards authenticity and towards creating and engendering trust is a critical outgrowth of this time. And I hear it from many people. And that the question we're faced with, of course, is how to carry it forward. Like when we, as some businesses will do, get back into offices, get back on airplanes, go back to conferences and all those things. There's a lot we can look forward to, but how can we make sure we maintain that authenticity, that trust? And that's a challenge. How are you thinking about that as you go into this year?
That's a great question, because I've gotten to this place where it's tough to plan ahead on some level. I think we all are craving to, we all have our numbers and we're looking ahead and we're making our plans. We're heading into our laborious fiscal planning season right now. Our fiscal year is July. But there's part of us that really wants to maintain some level of agility. And I know that word's been used a lot. I think it's more meaningful now. To be really responding to the cues that are right in front of us.
Right.
Because I really don't know. Like I can't, when I think about going to, let's say, Dreamforce in the next 2 years, I'm like, oh God, what's that going to be like? Are we going back to that? I don't know. I don't know. I think it remains to be seen how we're going to take the good and merge it with this concept of going back to normal. I don't believe in going back to normal. I don't think that's a real thing, because we adapt. We're adaptive creatures. And so that adaptability, I think, has been inspiring. And like I said, I think we're approaching our business in a way that, of course, we have to have a fundamental plan. Our stakeholders expect that. But what we're overlaying is a go-to-market planning motion that's much more nimble. And that we really are listening to our customers more than anything to drive how we turn the dials on that go-to-market plan. And take advantage of those opportunities as they're presented to us by the market and by our customers. So I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question. I don't know. That's a great question.
Right. It's the one we all have to struggle with, that notion of what we will do. And I think it's important that we do give it some thought, even if we don't have an answer. I noticed there, as you sort of mentioned, it's fiscal planning season. We're on a July fiscal year as well. I'm curious, sort of swinging back maybe to just something more practical. Like last year was a lot of real-time budget changes for lots of businesses, plus minus all over the map. How are you working with your customers to help them through that process to enable them. We're canceling all our events. We're doing this. We're budget's up, budget's down. That's a lot happened in real time. My team and I went through it last year. I'm curious if you learned anything, if there were some insights that you gained from it, or how you worked with customers, given that you were probably on the front line for many of them of having to keep up with those changes.
Yeah, I think for our existing customer base, I believe that our customer success teams and the relationships that they have with, well, our entire services organization for sure, really rallied to make sure that those customers that were struggling recognize that what they could use our tool to help facilitate. So that was on the one hand. I think that when we look at our prospecting motion, because I think this was I spent a lot of time with sellers, and I think the biggest challenge was, am I supposed to sell? Like, is it inappropriate to sell? Like, what am I? And so I think that Allocadia did a really good job with our marketing resources to pivot a little bit away from our tried and true messaging cadence and format to, again, be a little bit more inquisitive and to listen. And we enabled our field team to do that as opposed to sticking to the script.
Right.
And that became our most important avenue to building trust and, again, to being authentic. So you're selling and that you have to make a certain sales objective, but how you go about that had to be different. It really had to be different. And we had certain calls that were uncomfortable because that particular person that we're talking to is really in a panic state. But then that's an opportunity to offer some calm and a path forward through a solution, or sitting down with a customer who's trying to get really creative with the solution and working on technical outcomes or just a roadmap to get to those business objectives.
Do you think that when your sellers had to move away from the traditional script, traditional of engagement, do you think they perform better?
I fundamentally believe, because I buy software too, that is the better way. Longer term, it's the better way.
And
it might take you longer. It might take you a little bit longer, but I'm a big believer, especially in a SaaS business, that you're not just qualifying for that initial deal, you're qualifying for the long-term value of that relationship. And so if you can start that off on the right footing with authenticity and trust, you can't lose. I don't think you can lose.
I think that's such an important insight. First of all, when you buy from a SaaS company, you are buying into a relationship, a long-term.
Yep.
The whole concept, like we all talk about it, we're measured on ARR. And that means that's recurring revenue. Like we want to build a relationship by adding more value to our customers, and our customers expect that of us. So I think that's an important point you made. I also, I agree, right? Of course, sellers, I think, will do better with trust, authenticity, freeing themselves of the script and focusing on what really matters. And as a person who's on the marketing side of the equation, I would expect you to believe that. When you think about the sellers, on the seller side, right, we all work with them all the time. Was that comfortable for them, or was that uncomfortable for them?
Well, we have a very young, like an early career tip of the spear strategy with our business development team. And so they're very coachable. And so we really did a lot of coaching. There was a very hands-on approach to ensuring that they had a place to try things out, that they had a place to turn their chair, pick up the phone, and make sure that there was a level of comfort and some practice there that was well received. And then we also have a very big culture of sharing. So we have our calls of the week, and the entire sales team is listening to that and We're doing the high five. So a very collaborative sharing culture in our field organization, which is actually kind of rare to the degree that I've experienced anyways. And so that lent itself to that for sure. But for us, the training and I think the ongoing enablement is around the path of inquiry, how you ask really good questions so that you get your prospective customer talking about their reality. You know, that's really what this is about. Like, you need to understand fundamentally what they need to accomplish in their own business. So asking them about their customers and what their customers are going through, as opposed to sticking to the script about what we do and how we're great. Yeah, so I think it was uncomfortable at first because of most of where they were coming from, but then we kind of surrounded them with a bit of love and recognized that it's not going to be perfect, but that they had a place and a feedback loop that was going to sustain them transitioning to that new way.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great, and I think that those are important points, because we want to take sellers, and particularly early career BDRs and others that have to understand how to engage, and whether that be through your internal training. We use an external model from a company called Force Management that delivers something very similar in helping our sellers understand our customers and their real needs, and that's so critical. And this notion, and you mentioned it, and it's one of our key tenets at Acoustic, the notion of listening. That's a key part of how you learn what's going on. We go through a time of change like this, of unprecedented events like the pandemic and everything else that has gone on for the past year, right? It being sensitive to that is even more important. Now, the flip side of that, and I'm sure you've seen this, and I know I have, is this increase, unfortunately, I've seen in false sincerity, where I get one more email and I'm sorry to interrupt you during these difficult times, or I'm sure you have other things to do. Like, well, other things to do and not read your email. But like this sort of very transparently insincere attempt to ingratiate and be sincere, I've actually found to be disheartening, and I've seen quite an increase of it.
And I think that's been. I personally believe that we're on a bit of a cusp when it comes to business development. Like, I hope email's dead really soon. Like, it's got to die soon. It really does, because I think it's just, notwithstanding the message, but the channel is just not.
I do sell an email automation solution, and we really like people sending email. But
I know you do, but to your point, I think there's a lot of bad apples out there that are ruining that potential. We've seen a shift where LinkedIn is becoming more of a prevalent, successful platform. But that too, I mean, I've seen LinkedIn spam. I've seen an increase in that too, and I can tell that I'm part of an automated cadence. So how do we get around that? I think we're still playing with that right now. I don't think we have the optimal tool set right now. All we can do right now is work on the message with the team and make sure that they've got the skills, that if they do get somebody on the phone, which is really hard to do these days, but if they do, that they make every effort to listen and be authentic, and have, make sure that person has a valuable experience spending the 2, 3, 4, or 5 minutes with you. I used to tell other business development reps, this is pre-COVID, make me smarter just a little bit with every interaction. Make me a little bit smarter.
And I think that's terrific advice. That and again, like on the point of email, yes, Acoustic does sell an email platform. We're very proud of it. People use it, but I agree that it is a medium that has been abused tremendously.
Yeah.
And we're big advocates for just doing a better job with email, and
Yeah.
not just the content, but even just thinking about email through the lens of how to make it something that is a valuable method of communication. And I could argue that I don't want email to die. I don't, but I want email to be better. I want it to be better. My phone rings all the time because my phone number gets out there and my mobile phone gets out there, but I don't answer my mobile phone unless I recognize the number. So there's a part of me that feels like every time it rings and I know that it's either spam or a salesperson, I kind of feel bad for the salesperson that, like, I'm one of many people that, they or their auto dialer are going to hit during the day that's not going to answer. And then, someone will try a text message or a LinkedIn message, and we are struggling. And I think you tap into a bigger point of what else is there? If you eliminate email and you're not going to answer your phone and you're on LinkedIn and you're sort of very, careful there, and you're certainly not going to respond to every text message you get to win free prizes, and we're not going to be meeting in person as much or in a different way. What's left?
Great question. And we recently, did you attend our Calm event?
I did not. I wanted to. I couldn't.
Okay.
And which probably, is indicative of the fact that I needed it all the more. I registered. Something else came up, but I do meditate, several times a week, and now just have to keep paying for Calm.
But what's interesting is that we decided very purposefully that we'd have a quarterly event every year, a quarterly event, significant event that had nothing to do with selling Allocadia. Let's just find things that are going to engage people without the threat of being sold to. And it's been the biggest success for us in this past year, right? So whether we were doing the marketing awards and the toast and roast, or we had the Calm event as well, the quality of conversations after the fact, incredible. So notwithstanding the attendance rates and all that good stuff and the usual metrics that you have around an event, very solid. The quality of the conversations when our sales teams then engage, because there's almost like a level of trust inherently built just by the dint that we didn't try to sell you. We gave you something.
Right. You did. So, and I thought it was exceptionally well promoted, well planned. Several people on my team did attend. And I think you tapped into something that all of us are thinking a lot about, which is creating opportunities for engagement.
Yes.
Right, without necessarily making it an opportunity that is transactionally focused.
Correct. And I think that's where my statement, email has to die, is that transactional nature and the inherent stress related to your inbox. When you're looking at the count on your phone going, oh God. And inbox 0. Yeah. Okay, sure.
Down to 0 all the
time.
Right.
But I also believe too, and I think that you guys are tapping into this, the CMO huddle is there's power in community. There really, really is. And I feel like that's personally, I think that's the next big untapped wave of really trying to bring people together in communities of shared value creation, right? You can call it an ecosystem, you can call whatever you want to call it. And this has been some of the work that I was doing volunteering wise was really looking at how do we create sustainable ecosystems, whether they be small businesses, not-for-profits, where there's an inherent sharing of values, foundation of values, to create value within our communities, within our business ecosystems. And I think that I'm hoping that this level of authenticity and connection parlays into that. That's what I'd love to see. I don't know how to do it yet.
I hear you, and I think so. I think you're really tapping into that moment where, coming out of a transformational year, coming out of the reality of so many professionals sitting at home staring at their screen all day. We are asking ourselves, what can we do differently? We are questioning everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I too want to question email and everything else that we do, because I want to make it better and more useful.
Yeah.
I personally go crazy when I get a bad email. In fact, to the point where I've called people out publicly for sending bad emails. It's just, I think it's an important thing to do. And I also love this notion of community, because we've redefined our communities as we go through being at home, being in limited groups that we can interact with, and asking ourselves, well, what really mattered and what would we want to do again? And I think that we're going to see some of that fallout as we move back into live events. You mentioned Force earlier, and the 100,000 people or however many people attend that, or Open World, or any of the other big events.
Yeah.
I think we have to rethink those in a way that allows us to both engage, but also to feel safe. I know this is something that I think a lot about. I'm sure you do. My wife and I were just talking about this last night. It's spring here in Boston. We're actually having beautiful weather. So we went to dinner last night, outdoor dining, where we've both been fortunately very safe and had lots of precautions during this time. We're like, let's go to our favorite place, sit out outside, and we're excited. It was the first day that they were back open with the outdoor dining, street dining here in Boston, and we were there and we were enjoying it, and we felt calm and safe-ish. And then the most interesting thing happened, which was, we live right here in the South End in Boston. No people, right? In fact, it is a neighborhood.
Yep.
And we saw a friend walking by on the street, and it was this moment of like amazement and then sort of stress, and then she came over, and we were all like, had to put our masks back on. She was masked, and it was like, is it okay if we hug you? And she's like, well, she'd been out of state for a few months, and she'd been completely vaccinated, and there was this new set of social interactions, and I thought about that a lot afterwards. In every script is being rewritten. Every time I'm going to meet a new person in a professional situation, my scripts have been rewritten now, and we all have to find a place where we can feel like we know what to do. And I'm not sure we'll get there immediately.
No, I 100% agree. I think we're in an in-between stage, and I'm finding this spring challenging too. Like, again, we've got the nice weather as well, and there's just a general fatigue. We're in our area, it seems like we've been so good. Now our numbers are starting to climb again. We're very worried about a third wave and more lockdowns here. And our vaccine program isn't trucking along as quickly as you guys. We're getting there, but there's a sense of like, oh God, please don't let us go back to that, right? Because the end is like coming through the other end of the pandemic crisis, the health crisis feels like we're getting closer to the light at the end of the tunnel. But to your point, the residual stress of not being around people, like I went browsing in a store for the first time in months, and we just finished a renovation on the house. Everything was bought online, everything. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go buy some towels. I'm going to go into a store. And I felt uncomfortable. And I just kind of went, maybe not. So to your point, when things start to open up, just how comfortable are we going to be going back to some of these things?
And that, if nothing else, should be the impetus for us to question some of the things we may have done in the past that just may not be as relevant just may not be needed, or that we can actually reinvent appropriately going forward. And
I look at the event, the shift in events as well, right? So this going from, in soccer industry, the season.
Yes, indeed.
And then spreading that out and having an overwhelming amount of online and video-based content, almost to an extreme now, where it's tough to really isolate the quality there too. And so that concept of just changing the medium or the channel, yet the lack of authenticity or the depth of the content, or what is actually being presented or offered, we're only seeing some bright spots. Like, I look at a conversation like this is highly valuable. It really, really is. Do I want to go and see another demo of something, some tool? No, because I probably wouldn't want to do that in the first place. Right. So I think that we're in this in-between stage where we're the old is still in our rear view. The old way, normal, is still in the rear view. Yet we're trying to reconcile that with what should happen next. I think a lot of people want to go back just because it's easier. But I hope that we do find enough folks with a voice that want to challenge that and take us to a next place.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think that's as good a way to sort of summarize this discussion, in that we do want to get somewhere new. As professionals, as marketing leaders, we're so in touch with communications and cadences and all of those contact points. And we also know that ultimately it's about being human. It is fundamentally about, maybe I want to see a demo, maybe I don't, but I love talking to people, and I want to engage with people. And you said it very well earlier. If you could learn one thing, that's terrific, right? If I can learn one thing, and I've learned plenty of things during this conversation, that makes my day. And the more we can think about the value we add to the people we engage with, the more it becomes a better blueprint for how businesses should be operating.
100%.
That's terrific. Kelly, thank you so much for investing your time and chatting with everyone today. And I appreciate that tremendously, and appreciate everyone at the team at Allocadia does. It was a pleasure to connect with you. And for our audience, thank you for joining the Reset. I'm Guadagno of Acoustic, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much.